Hi, I'm the Guitar Trooper, YouTube's favorite old guy. It's Saturday, October 22nd, 1966, at the home of 24-year-old Beach Boys founding member and songwriter Brian Wilson. He is checking the Billboard Hot 100 chart, looking for the position of the latest single from the Beach Boys. Wrapped in constant metamorphosis during the production, the song, about 3.5 minutes in length, had been released on Monday, October 10th, over the objections of their label, Capitol Records. He had not seen it listed at all on the chart of October 15th, which is where it should have been if it first charted on release. Brian is completely exhausted and now quite concerned. This single isn't just another recording, there's a lot riding on it, including the public perception of the Beach Boys as a viable act, now that the surfing sound has been squashed by the British invasion of 1963. The production time, effort, and money that had been expended on the recording since he and collaborators Tony Asher and Mike Love began work on it in late January of 1966 was nothing short of historic. Finally, he spots the entry, and his heart sinks. It's on the chart, all right, but at the lackluster position of number 81. He slams the paper down on the dining room table. How could this be? He says to himself. But Brian needn't worry. The song will quickly top the chart, allowing the Beach Boys to pivot away from the surf sound and enter the pop mainstream again and make an indelible mark on pop music history. It's late December 1965. 1965 had not been a bad year for them. In fact, the guys had produced several top 40 and even top 10 hits. In spite of this, it was clear to Brian that the tide was clearly turning. It's January 1966. While the Beach Boys tour Japan without him, Brian Wilson stays in California, obsessed with the task of writing songs that blend the vocal harmonies of their former surfing sound with the more expanded themes and musicality of the contemporary 1966 pop scene. He hooks up with Tony Asher, his favorite collaborator, for lyrics, and they begin writing lyrics for a song that is simply about how it feels to be in love and sensing the other's feelings. Producer and songwriter Phil Spector is Brian's idol, and Brian has spent hours at Gold Star Studios watching Phil work. He wants to be like Phil, using the studio as an instrument rather than just a means of capturing a song. Brian adopts the wall of sound technique, wanting to take it to the next level, whatever that may be. Brian Wilson, along with Mike Love, pore over the draft lyrics that resulted from the collaboration with Tony Asher. Brian and Asher's first draft of the lyrics includes the trendy term vibe, a lyrical idea that Brian had first presented to Asher. Asher had objected to it, but Brian's response was, "But that's what people say." Mike looks at Brian. "I don't like having vibe in the song. It makes it sound corny. But the rest of it looks good."
And I went, "You know what, Mike? I would like to call it good vibrations." He goes, "How's this?" "I'm picking up good vibrations."
Brian gives in, and an edit is penciled over the draft. Brian's fertile musical mind also has a set of musical ideas that are swirling about in his head. He calls them feels. Brian's plan is to record the feels in the same production style as Phil Spector. After the creative process develops, he will begin treating the feels as sections or modules and then assembling them into a final track. He envisions his recording as transcending anything ever heard before from the Beach Boys, a recording that will outlast the current musical era. He grabs every musician that Phil Spector had used, which are most of the best West Coast session players, and schedules a session at Gold Star Studios. Pursuing specific sounds, Brian will use these musicians almost exclusively. Only a few parts are played by any Beach Boy. 17th of February, 1966, Gold Star Studios, Hollywood, California, 11:30 p.m. The first recording session is underway for Good Vibrations. It will last until 3 a.m. the next day. The song concept is so new that the AFM contract sheets list the tune as 2 minutes 29 seconds and Untitled. In the studio, there are 13 session players, the most recognizable being Hal Blaine on drums, Ray Pullman on bass guitar, and Larry Knechtel on organ. Later sessions will also include Lyle Ritz on either a 4-string electric bass or a stand-up bass viola, and Carol Kaye on guitar or bass guitar. An editor's note here, there are sources that say Glen Campbell played on at least some of the sessions for Good Vibrations. There is no evidence, however, on AFM contract sheets that he played on any of the sessions for this recording. Brian writes somewhat crude individual lead sheets for each part, but also visits with each musician and frequently hums his concept for a sound, or otherwise vocalizes it, mimicking what he hears in his head as he runs through the individual lead sheets with each of them.
The only one that seemed to have any ideas of music at all was Brian Wilson, and he taught the rest of them by rote. And Brian didn't read or write music. Entirely different world for me. Because he came over and he sang something and said, play this. I said, write it down, I'll play it. He says, write it down. I don't write down any music. You want it written down, you write it down. Okay, I wrote it down.
The atmosphere in the studio is informal, inventive, and experimental. Ideas are tried as he thinks of them, sometimes using just a few minutes with any particular musician, and at other times exceeding the session time limit. This session, to lay down a first version of the backing track, will absorb 26 takes, and is done start to finish without any module edits. This is also the only session completed for Good Vibrations until April 9th, as Brian isn't satisfied with the result as yet and will not be using it on Pet Sounds. Work on the song is suspended, therefore, until after the band finishes recording the Pet Sounds album. April 9th, 1966. After finishing Pet Sounds, work on Good Vibrations resumes. From the very beginning, Brian has conceived of the track to include a sound he had heard on sci-fi movies as a kid. It was made by an odd electronic musical instrument called a theremin. He wants that sound on the record, but isn't sure who can play it. After a few phone calls, he discovers that Paul Tanner, the inventor of a modernized version of the instrument that he has dubbed the electro theremin, is available as a session player. The original theremin is an instrument which has proved to be rather ungainly for many people to master. It uses 2 antennas as controls, one for the volume and the other for frequency. The distance of a hand from either antenna determines the volume level or the pitch of the note produced. Paul Tanner, who had played trombone with the Glenn Miller Orchestra early in his career, was an educated musician, a college professor, and an inquisitive tinkerer. He applies his expertise and a concept borrowed from the trombone slide to improve the theremin's design. Although his instrument, the electro-theremin, has the same circuitry and sound of the original theremin, it is more adapted for use as a musical instrument as it uses a keyboard graphic across the front of it, with a slide control that allows specific notes to be accurately sounded. Brian books Paul Tanner on the April 9th session, and Paul books 1.5 hours of overtime, playing his electro-theremin on overdubs until 9:30 p.m. to fill passages as envisioned by Brian. He will continue to contribute to 7 additional sessions. Work on the production continues through August and early September to complete all of the modules, all of the overdubs, and the vocals. In the process of creation, Brian experiments with several concepts, but ultimately decides not to use them. For example, 2 entire sessions on May 24th and May 25th result in tapes that are never used for the final version. A fuzz bass line recorded by Bill Pittman on June 12th is likewise discarded along with many other pieces. August through September 1966, Columbia Studios, Hollywood, California. Brian now knows the modules that he will be using for the final version and records the vocals in sections for each one. The bop bop Good Vibrations bop bop are recorded first. A couple of weeks after that, Brian adds the high good Vibrations behind it. Mike Love had already come up with the bass vocal line, I'm picking up good vibrations, she's giving me the excitations, and that travels below the other 2 high parts. Brian wants more work done on the lyrics, though, and so turns to Mike again for input. On the way to the studio, in the car, and dictating to his wife, Mike Love creates more ethereal lyrics for the verses. These will end up on the final master. October 26, 1966, at Columbia Studios. Final splicing and mixing is done, using modules from earlier sessions and adding the vocals recorded in August and September. This is the 9th and final version, using verses from version 1, choruses from version 6, a bridge from version 3, the tag that was recorded on September 1st, the reprise chorus from version 6, and the coda and fade-out chorus from version 5. Remember that this is in the days of analog tape, where splicing means literally cutting a source tape at a precise point and then attaching it using special adhesive tape to the end of the master. It is an arduous and meticulous process. The 9th and final iteration of Good Vibrations is complete, and the tape is mastered to vinyl. The single is released on Monday, October 10th, 1966. As we stated at the beginning of our story, Good Vibrations originally charted at a lackluster number 81. However, 1 week later, it had jumped to number 38. By November 26th, it was number 2. And 2 months after release, on December 10th, 1966, it was number 1. The song remained on the Hot 100 for 14 weeks. The work effort of Brian and the Beach Boys, particularly that of Brian, during this period is astonishing. For Good Vibrations alone, between April and September of 1966, it would ultimately take a grand total of 17 sessions to complete at 4 different studios, resulting in a 3-foot-tall stack of reels containing 90 hours of source tape. And all of this after the group had just completed the elaborate Pet Sounds album, plus recording additional material for the then-aborted Smile album. The production cost for the 3.5-minute Good Vibrations track is estimated to have been between $50,000 and $70,000, equating to about $500,000 in 2024, which was much more than the typical production cost of an entire run-of-the-mill album, and about the same cost as the expensive Pet Sounds album. Good Vibrations would prove to be Brian Wilson's final number 1 composition, and it would be the Beach Boys' last number 1 for 22 years, when in 1988, Kokomo put them back on top. In 1967, Good Vibrations received a Grammy nomination for Best Vocal Group Performance and was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1994. Its influences on pop music and recognitions are too numerous to list. Let's just say that it was monumental. Brian Wilson was but a child when he asked his mother what made dogs bark at some people. She told him that dogs can sense bad vibrations and good ones. Hey guys, thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do me a favor and click on that like, thumbs up icon and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. You can also use comments to suggest video subject matter regarding pop music and pop music culture from the 1950s to the 1970s. A great thing that you can also do to support the channel is just share the video with your friends. Click on the arrow icon and pick the destination person. Help us expand the audience. Speaking of supporting the channel, this would be a great time to subscribe if you're not yet a subscriber. It's easy and it's free, and it lets YouTube know that you support the channel. Just click on the subscribe icon and be sure to select the top notification bell on the drop-down menu so that you'll be notified whenever I post new content for the public. If you would like the opportunity to see content a few days earlier when it's viewable only to channel members, you can upgrade your subscription and become one. Just click on the join icon and follow the instructions. It's not free to upgrade, but it's as cheap as YouTube would let me make it. Thanks again for watching.